All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Murderbugs author Q&A. We have assembled a large portion of the Murderbugs authors, and I'm going to go ahead and just share the whole group here for a moment so that we can get a bit of a hello wave from everyone who is here. I'm Mike Jack Stoombos. I am the editor of Murderbugs and the creator of the Unhelpful Encyclopedia series. So anthologies about some kind of animal and intent to kill. And this one, Murderbugs, is all about bugs and intent to kill. I'd also like to introduce you to Lutra the Parrot, who is the mascot of Wonderbird Press, and to Morrigan Stoombos, who is my wife and partner in the business as well. So yeah, thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and start doing some kind of whip throughs of the group, and I'm going to turn it to speaker view mode so that it will go to whoever is speaking. So for starters, we're going to get a bit of an introduction of sort of who you are and what you write. And in addition to that, what is your story for this particular anthology? If you want to give a brief tagline or teaser, feel free to do so. And we won't flash the lights or try to get you to jump topic unless you're going for more than a couple minutes here. So we don't want to give away too much all at once, but definitely want to get some shares out. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and just go down the participants list, and I'll have people jump on here. And Desmond, if you're in a position to jump in, go ahead and get us started.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Desmond Astaire. I write sci-fi, and this story called You're the Mother of Doomsday, and it is about a computer pioneer in the 80s who's plagued by visions of the future and basically is convicted to stop the advent of the personal computer.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, and for people who are watching this as a recording, you may have also had a chance to read You're the Mother of Doomsday as a preview story for the anthology when we had it up on Kickstarter, along with a code embedded in the story. And if you haven't done so yet, well, when the anthology comes out, you'll be able to read that then. All right, thank you, Desmond. Let's jump down to AD.
Hi, everyone. My name is AD Newman. My story in the anthology is titled Cheddar Hunts a Vampire Moth, and it is a story about an intrepid house cat who bravely defends his house against an intruder moth who has bad intentions for the household. And I mostly write science fiction, fantasy, and horror, mostly various speculative fiction genres, and I also dabble a bit in screenwriting as well.
Awesome, thanks. All right, jumping to Candace. Come on, Candace Lyle.
Hi, my story is The Telltale Cricket. It's based on Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Telltale Heart. I thought, what would happen if a cricket drove someone insane instead of a heart, like in Poe's story? And it's fun to write, and it's fun to read. I write fantasy and science fiction, and I have won a Critters Award for one of my stories.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat Gerchik. I write science fiction and fantasy, short stories, and also screenplays and cartoons animation over the years. I've won a couple of Aurora Awards, which are behind me on my microwave there. My story for this anthology is called The Tomato Liberation Front. And it's based on the fact that I'm part of a community garden where people are always stealing the cherry tomatoes. So this time it's quite a twist on who's stealing the tomatoes and what happens afterwards, because there is a murder. Thank you.
Yep, I had a really fun time illustrating that particular one. I will not share it presently because there are spoilers involved in that illustration, but go ahead and jump on down to David.
So I'm David Hankins. I write lighthearted speculative fiction because there's not nearly enough humor in the world. Although this story is one of my few tries at something dark and dismal, and it came out funny. So it's The Rise and Fall of Frankie's Patisserie. It's written in a noir style about Danica, who is trying to end the bakery war. And turns out that the entire thing is based on the honey from sentient bees. And the bees are definitely murderous. In fact, there's a murder in the first scene. So,
yeah. Thanks. And that was another one that was up as a preview story. So if you haven't had a chance to read that yet, well, a couple months you'll be able to jump in on it as well. All right, Julia.
Hello, Julia V. Ashley. I write mainly contemporary fantasy. Currently I have out a new collection of short stories, Jazz by Faylight, set in New Orleans about the hidden magic there. And my story is Eugene, such a sweet boy, about Abigail, a lovely praying mantis, is trying to sun herself when her beloved's mother and sister show up accusing her of murder. And the story proceeds from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. All right, go ahead, KZ.
Hi, I'm KZ Richards. I write mostly speculative fiction, most of that sci-fi, although I'll dabble in pretty much anything. My story is Daring Jenny, the amazing Arachnidian astronaut, and it is about a social media savvy Brazilian white-knee tarantula who wins a trip to space.
Yep. Yeah, social media savvy was definitely the amusing twist on that particular arachnid. Awesome, thanks. Go ahead, Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee Saunders. I write science fiction and fantasy in a kind of a wide variety. So most of my science fiction is of the social science fiction nature. So it's, what happens to the things or the people or the things that are also people and how they deal with technology or changes in events. My story is called Where All Memories Are One. It's about a variety of very large insectoid aliens. They're mostly beetle or mantis-like, depending on the particular place they are in the hive. They're called the Calabrini, and the story is told from the point of view of the hive mind as they defend their nest from the invading humans.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Lee. Jumping on down. I've lost my spot on scrolling. All right, Mike, go ahead and jump in.
I'm Mike Wyant Jr. I write primarily science fiction, though I'm going to be jumping into kind of steampunk and epic fantasy here in a minute. My story is called Where the Light Ends. I actually had to double check what the title was because it went through several iterations and I forgot until just now. It's about a colony on the outer fringes of space, and I really wanted to explore what it would be like to be a kid in one of a kid who'd like to explore stuck in one of those colonies when you're stuck in like a caldera of a volcano, and that's your entire movement area. And the fallout from over exploring and the mental impact that has on people.
Nice. All right, jumping down to Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I write mostly fantasy, some sci-fi and horror, a lot of young adult fantasy. My tomorrow, the bug is a half dragon, half bug dragonfly, and it's about a girl, kind of sassy girl, a young girl who has a pet dragonfly creature, and it's about who she feeds to it as sacrifices.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I'm not sure if the feed glitched a little bit there, but if you didn't catch the title, it was the Who Should I Feed to the Dragonfly Tomorrow? Yep. Cool. And Shannon, thank you for joining us. Go ahead and jump in. Tell us what you write and your story.
Thanks. I'm Shannon. I write historical fantasy and science fiction. My story is called Goldbug Fever, and it takes place during the San Francisco Gold Rush. It's about a man who's investigating rumors of plague in the city, a plague of gold beetles whose bite leaves their victims dead, and he doesn't think that all is as it seems on the surface. So it's sort of a murder mystery, historical fantasy adventure.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. And finally, Tammy. And if I've missed anyone in the roster, let me know later. But Tammy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tammy Burke. I write predominantly YA fantasy. The story I have in Murderbugs is a firefly's conscious and the psychopath. I took that story. I was thinking, what would happen if a very famous cricket from a childhood story created an organization to help humans with consciousness, and then maybe one of those bugs turned bad? What would happen?
Yep. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for sharing. One of the things that I kind of find fun about doing these kinds of intros and Q&As, for many of the authors in the anthologies, they haven't necessarily read all of these pieces, so a lot of people are getting to hear about them for the first time, which is kind of fun here. All right, so we've got a few questions that I wanted to get out to a lot of the group, and we'll go ahead and flow through those ones, and so we're going to go ahead and talk about the story ideas themselves. So as an open-ended thing, how did you come up with your story idea is pretty big, but for everyone, there's going to be some kind of an inspiration or something that's going to draw them into a particular idea and hopefully inspire something that's really fun to play with. So how did you come up with your story idea? And I'll go ahead and pass these ones around, and I'll get started with Ryan. Ryan, how did you come up with your story idea?
So I came up with the first line, and that basically, I used that to write the rest of the story. It was, at midnight, I fed my younger sister to the dragonfly. She resisted as usual. And so I thought it had like a really fun kid voice. And I like little kid voices. So I built on that, and there were just like lines within the opening scene that came to me, talking about like her feeding her sister, or supposedly her sister, to this creature, and I just, it kind of snowballed from there,
as all good things do. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. All right, Desmond, go ahead and jump in.
David can probably validate me on this one, but government computers absolutely suck. They are full of so much bloatware and antivirus you can barely operate on. So I was at work one day with my crew, and we were having some computer issues, and I just yelled across the office, "I bet you Bill Gates was a time traveler from the future and came back to make sure that build such stupid computers that they never get smart enough to take over the world." And in that exclamation, the idea kind of came that, you know, you had Bill Gates, you had what's his face. What if there was a third person who was around in the 80s that was leading the personal computer revolution, that was even more forward thinking than, you know, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates? And what if they were stopped from advancing their idea? What would cause that to happen? You know, with what we see in this day and age of Web 2.0, social media, how nasty people are or can be online, and then also the advancements that we're seeing even in this past year alone in AI and quantum computing. What if there was someone else that would have had us even further along, and what if they were stopped? And that's basically how the plot came about. Of course, it was tweaked many different ways to, well, you'll see when you read it, but that's basically where it came from.
Thank you, Desmond. All right, AD, go ahead. How'd you come up with your idea?
So I, when I was thinking about the subject matter for the anthology, I was thinking about different types of insects and how they could be interpreted. And vampire moths are a real species or group of species of moths that exist in different regions. And while it's relatively rare for them to drink human blood, there is at least one species that can. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that would be a fun type of insect to work with and kind of imagine, because it's grounded in reality, but also something that can be kind of taken in a science fiction sort of direction. If you imagine that maybe these moths could migrate or be introduced to different areas of the world. And but really though, for the main plot, and when I was starting out, I didn't know if I wanted to be more of a serious story or more of a comedic one, but I have had cats all my life, and my current cat especially, it was a very good insect hunter when she was younger. And it seemed like that was her favorite thing to do every day, was just hunt insects and catch moths that were flying through the air and anything else that she could get. And I thought that was an interesting way to kind of portray the insect as both the intruder that has possibly dangerous intentions, that's murderous, but also the victim of the murderous cat that is defending his house, but also has this hunting instinct that leads it to want to hunt and destroy it and become fixated on it. So that was it was a fun idea for me to work with, and it was an opportunity for me to both write about this insect that I thought was really interesting reading about, and also write some humor involving cats, which I always enjoy.
Nice. Yeah. And for people who are wondering, we don't presently have a cat anthology planned in the near future. My guess is that if we end up doing that, I'd probably enlist somebody else to be the lead editor, because somebody else probably knows much more about cats than I do. But yeah, thank you, AD. All right. And speaking of which, Kat, how did you come up with the idea for your story?
Hi, sorry, I'm addicted to visual aids here. That's my cat. I am part of a community garden, as I said. And here is one of my pumpkins from this year, she said creepily. Now I don't know what to do with it. Anyway, in the community garden, as I mentioned before, people are always stealing your fruit, like your cherry tomatoes, your big tomatoes, any peas, anything nice like that. So this is an ongoing thing with the garden. So people try to figure out who it is and how it happened. And that coincided with the summer solstice reading event, which the writers group I belong to called Wordos does. So they give you, well, we vote on them, prompts that say, okay, you have like 3 weeks to write a flash story using one or more of these prompts. And there's usually at least 4 prompts. And one of these prompts had tiny little aliens in it. So I combined that with the garden thing. And now it is tiny little aliens stealing cherry tomatoes. And the tiny little aliens are originally from a stink bug, kind of a ethnicity, as it were. So it was really kind of fun. And then the person who notices them becomes I shouldn't tell the whole story, but there is a murder involved in it. So it was great fun. I read it at the summer solstice reading last year, and I thought, oh, this is cool. It could make a little murder story. So I did that. I really enjoy having prompts to write from. I think that's a great thing for writers. And yeah, it was really fun. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right. KZ, tell us about the inspiration behind the social media savvy tarantula.
The inspiration for my story was the Teachers in Space project and the Challenger disaster. I combined that with the fact that many people today have social media accounts for their pets, to imagine a scenario where NASA was looking for not a teacher, but some kind of wildlife to send into space to kind of get people interested in the space program. Then I decided, because I'm terrified of spiders, I would make my main character a tarantula who won this contest, and make her quirky and lovable and basically everything I think spiders are not.
Everything that spiders are not. That's a big list. But yeah, I think you hit quite a few of them in the story. Awesome. All right, we're gonna go ahead and segue to the next question. So This is usually a really fun one to share, and one that I've discovered over the years is like a great way of getting authors who call themselves introverts out of their shell. I asked them about their favorite part of their story, and kind of get them to think a lot about that. So I'm going to start with Candace in a moment. So, what is your favorite part of your story? Or if you want to reword it, like, what did you most enjoy about writing it? What scene did you most enjoy? All right, so Candace, go ahead and get us started.
I guess my favorite part was when he absolutely went insane and tried to pull the cricket off of his shoulders, and he was sure it was crawling all over him, and he ended up naked and then jumped out the window and landed in the rose bushes. So that was my favorite part.
Yeah, it's always amusing when you can make your characters do undignified things that you would never do in your own life.
Never.
Awesome. All right. So Tammy, who had written Firefly's Conscience and the Psychopath, what is your favorite part of your story?
Well, I think the most favorite part of writing that particular story was finding out what the motive was for the bad bug, which is a firefly, and writing the fact that when you're a little kid, you go out and you catch these bugs because they're neat. They fly around, and a lot of the boys will go, "Ooh, firefly!" and they'll rub them all over their bodies so they glow. I mean, if you're a firefly and that happens to your buddies, I think I would turn bad too. So I had a perfect move for this particular bug, and it was just like, wow, that is amazing. So I was almost rooting for that particular bug.
Nice. Yeah. All right. I'm going to jump over to Mike Wyant, who wrote Where the Light Ends. So yeah, what was your favorite part of telling this particular story?
Well, it's actually the first scene hook. It was a line that popped into my head that I kind of had stuck there. And it's the cave killed everyone, I lie. That's what happened. Like I started with that line and kind of built off that. Because the idea that I had the character's name is Journey, and she's sitting on a spaceship looking out into the void, but she can't see any stars because they're on the edge of the galaxy. And so she's finally made it off of her home planet, and she's just watching and looking and seeing nothing like she thought. Kind of like what probably came a bit from William Shatner's speech he gave after he came back from his Blue Origin trip, when he said, I expected there to be hopeful and look for adventure and all that, but all I saw was darkness, and all we have is this. So I kind of wanted to, I like the idea of using that as a core piece of this, which means that I am incredibly depressing compared to everybody else's story so far. Y'all are wonderful, and I'm over here like, let's hurt a kid.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of a range.
You don't win on depression.
There's a bit of a range of humor. You're gonna hear some of those tonight, but there are also some that go much deeper and darker as well. Yeah, I mean, like if we had Rebecca E. Treasure on here, like I think she'd also throw her hat in the ring on the depressing stories.
I think that's the one I've read, and I'm pretty sure you're right.
Yes. All right. Cool. So on to something that is I found more lighthearted. Maybe some other people will find it a bit ghastly. But Julia's story about the praying mantis, Eugene's such a sweet boy. Julia, what was the most fun part about writing this story?
Well, first, I'd like to say about the cricket and the telltale heart, that concept, if you've ever tried to get asleep with a cricket in your room, is just amazing. But onto my story. The praying mantis, we live near the Natchez Trace. We have all kinds of wildlife, and we found tiny black praying mantises swaying like they were trying to hypnotize us on one of our door frames. We've seen large green ones trying to pretend like they're leaves, small brown ones. One was fighting off a bird. It's the first time I'd seen it unfurl their wings, which is just spectacular. So when you said Murderbugs, I'm like, well, that's obvious because, of the fun idea that they consume their mates after, enjoying themselves, which I find a delightful, concept. I mean, my dear husband is the only exception. Don't cry, honey. They can hear you. So, but I think it's fun. But how do you start with that was the problem. I'm like, well, people know that they eat their mates. So do I have her just eat her mate right away? Do I have her eat her mate maybe? Do I have her forgive her mate? Do I have her, so I decided to make it a murder mystery, sort of. And I had the mother come accuse her of murdering her son. And of course, she's sitting in the sun snacking because she has a bit of a hunger issue, like me. We were in common this way. So as she's trying to help the mother search for her son, and through the whole thing, she's snacking away while diligently, supposedly looking for the corpse of her beloved. And we're not sure if the mother is wants to find her dear son alive or wants to find his corpse so she can prove that this woman has, consumed her dear boy. So anyway, that's where I started with it, which seemed like a great, a fun story to me. And then one of the most fun things about you, Mike, having edited it and a couple of people having read it for me, where they were like, yeah, they read through it and read about her, snacking on things as they go. And they're like, oh my God, they do what? And then you have to look it up to see, do praying mantises really do that? And yeah, they do. They're really pretty gruesome creatures, which makes them quite fun. So anyway, that's what made it fun to write.
Awesome. Yeah. It was definitely a fun one to read. And there are a couple more from authors who weren't here that are in that, we're going to place you into the head of a bug who could feasibly exist in an almost real world, but where the bug is more sentient. And so Envy Haskell's A Widow's Word feels like it could be in the same universe or similar style as Eugene's Such a Sweet Boy. So I'd recommend that one as well. Cool. All right. So we've talked about sort of the inspiration side and the favorite part of writing, but then let's get into the process. Let's get into, every author is going to have a slightly different way of getting the words on the page. And for people who are watching this and thinking about, writing their own short stories and then submitting them for publication, it can always be cool to kind of look behind the curtain and see what some other people are doing. And hopefully to get a bit of a range. If you all answer with the exact same question, or the exact same answer, okay. But but I will say that in general you'll probably hear a range. So we're gonna have Shannon get us started on this one. So Shannon, what is your short story writing process like?
So I would say that these days my short story writing process feels like it mirrors my novel process. It's just more condensed. Typically, once I have enough of a story and a character and I feel excited about it, I usually write the first little bit in just a burst of inspiration, one sitting. So for a short story, that's usually a page and a half. I'll just write all that down. If it's a longer work, usually I'll write 10,000 or so words, and then I put the story down for a bit before I come back and finish it. So I usually feel like I get a handle on who my character is and then let it rest while I'm thinking about how the rest of the story is going to fit together based off of that, and if I want to change anything before I commit all those words. The thing that I have really been doing over the last 2 to 3 years is I've actually been writing a lot on my phone. So this particular story, I wrote the whole thing on my phone and mostly on an airplane. And yeah, pretty much everything I'm doing these days is written on my phone. So that's a interesting part of the process, but I definitely recommend that if you're very time strapped.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, so writing on the phone on the plane. Yeah, some people go by hand, some people type on the plane. But yeah, if the phone's on hand and that's the easy way to get to it, awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing, Shannon. All right, gonna jump on over to Desmond. Desmond, what is your short story process like?
So I've noticed my process is a lot like how watching a movie unfolds. So it'll start out with the beginning. It's fun and exciting. It's as fun for me to write as it is for anything else. But then, once you get past that first third or so, I ask myself, okay, why am I writing this story? what's the theme or what's the purpose behind it? Because it's like in any story, action or dialogue, the characters alone won't take you through the entire process. There's got to be a meaning or a purpose. And I'm real weak on the middle of the story. That second act I'm not so great on, and then if I try really, really hard, I can come up with an ending or a back third that I really feel good about. And if I can land it properly, then I get this nice spooky feeling like, ooh, that made it all worth it. Once I get that down, I got to go back and polish it all up and make sure it's cohesive, because a lot of it's not. A lot of it's just kind of throwing stuff down because it feels good, because it feels right, and then the next day going back and going, what in the world did I just put onto that page? That doesn't make any sense. So, and it's fun. Just keep it fun. If it's not fun, you're not doing it right.
Nice. Yeah, wise words to outro on there. Yeah, cool. All right, Lee, go ahead and share about your short story writing process.
Well, I like to figure out who the characters are, know who I'm writing about, because my stories tend to be very character driven. And once I have at least a vague idea of who the stories are, then I'll create for myself some loose bullet points of where I think the story might be going. Dean Leslie Smith likes to write into the dark. I like to say I write into the dim. I'll have a handful of street lamps running down the street, and then I'll sort of wander along, kicking the story along from lamp to lamp to see what happens next. But I don't want to go completely into the dark. Once I get going, as I work my way from point to point, I'll modify the outline as I go. The story that I end up with may have little resemblance to where I intended from the beginning, although some of the major events that I've outlined usually will stay, although they might shift order. But it's often kind of a hybrid of exploratory and outlined fashion. And then as I'm writing the story, depending on how long it is and how long it takes me to do it, I loop through it quite frequently, layering back in bits and just making sure that it all holds together and that the voice is consistent, so that when I finish, I'm done.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I like the writing into the dim expression. That yeah, and also the metaphor of kicking the lantern around. I think I would personally prefer that to writing into the dark myself as well. But yeah. Excellent. And on short story process, finishing us off here, Candace, go ahead and share about your process.
So I like to start with a prompt or an idea, and I get out my legal pad and a pen, and I sit on the couch, and I turn on my lamp, and I cuddle into the couch, and I start writing. And pictures appear in my mind, and I try to get down everything that I see. Where is the person? Who are they? What's happening to them? And then once I get everything written down, I'll type it out on my computer. That's when I make sure that I have all the tri-fail cycles, the beginning and the end. And that's basically my process.
Cool. Thank you, Candace. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm hoping that, for anyone who's watching this who's thinking about like their own short story process, hopefully you're hearing that there are some different approaches and some different terminology to kind of like figure out here. So when you hear things like tri-fail cycles, and if that's something that you're not familiar with, fortunately, there are a lot of different guides and workshops around to be able to kind of continue working on these. And I'm going to put in the brief plug for groups like Superstars Writing Seminars, Apex Writers Group, and if you're interested in submitting to the Writers of the Future contest, well, Writers of the Future also has a free online workshop, and there are several others. But those are a couple that I want to briefly address. Also, largely because those are some of the groups that when I'm collecting stories for an anthology, I'm asking people in those groups to submit, because they're good places to actively work on writing craft in a number of ways. All right, so we've talked about process. let's talk about the harder side of the process. Let's dig into the speed bumps along the way, or the struggles. So what is something that you struggled with while writing your story, and how did you deal with that? Ryan, can you get us started with a struggle?
Yeah, so usually my process is like I write very slowly. I have to have everything planned out pretty meticulously. Like I have a very detailed outline before I even start writing the first draft. But this time, the voice of the little girl narrator came to me so strongly with like just phrases and lines from the first section that I kind of decided to do something different. I had never tried it before. So I kind of just I did it like without planning anything. And I pantsed it, I guess. Um, and it was really stressful because I like to know exactly what's going to happen in each section, and especially at the end. But this one I wrote scene by scene, and then I had to go back and change things. I really didn't even know how it was going to end until I wrote the last couple scenes. Um, and it was just really stressful. It was stressful for me, but it ended up working. Um, so at least now I know I can do it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, it's a great story. I mean, like, if I hadn't heard you talk through those things, I wouldn't actually known that it was that it was a struggle to figure out the direction of the story, because it made a ton of sense to me as I was reading it. But that's kind of one of the things we get looking behind the curtain. All right. Casey, what's something that you struggled with in writing Daring Jenny?
My challenge in writing Daring Jenny was that I'm a pretty reserved person, and I usually write very serious stories. And this was my first attempt at writing something lighthearted, quirky, humorous. And even though I chose to write about a sentient, signing, social media savvy spider, I kept trying to take it seriously. And so my first draft, which I'm glad that nobody read, was just so unbelievably cheesy. And so as I started to revise it, I realized that in order to fix the parts that weren't working, I needed to embrace its absurdity, not try and make it less absurd. So once I did that, then I started to have more fun with it, and I actually started to like its silliness.
Nice. Yeah. And I'm glad you did. Yeah. Embrace the absurdity. That can be a nice little piece of advice to put on. And for some stories, that is really a fun way to go. Awesome. All right. Lee, how about you? What is something that you struggled with while writing this one?
Well, it's one thing to get in a character's head and write from their point of view when it's a single point of view character, but I was writing from the point of view of a hive mind. And so depending on the scene, I was writing from the point of view of one character or 5 characters or a swarm of characters. And I was trying to make it still make sense, as well as convey the depth of emotion of what those characters were going through. Because it's not how we normally think. And so that was probably the biggest challenge in this story, and apparently I pulled it off, or at least you thought so. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing it. I don't know how many more stories I'll write from a hive mind point of view, but I'm glad I did this one.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So we've got the writing process and the struggles, and let's turn this out to other writers and talk through a little bit of advice. So if you heard something about a process or a struggle that can relate to you, great. And hopefully you can turn that into your own form of advice. But let's get some also direct advice as well. So AD, can you get us started? If you have advice for future short story writers and future short story submitters, what is your advice for them?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll start by saying, I mean, I see myself as still very new at the submission and publication process myself. I'm still learning a lot about it. I haven't published a lot, but one thing that I would definitely recommend that people start with is make sure that you are reading short fiction, especially in the genres that you're interested in writing and publishing. There are a lot of online journals and websites that publish things, and a lot of them that you don't need to subscribe to in order to read some or all of the stories that they post. So, for example, I really like Strange Horizons. I like Uncanny Magazine that posts a lot of their stories online. I also like Daily Science Fiction. Those are a few that I really like, and then also a lot of smaller online presses that will publish short fiction that you can find. And I know that there are services that will compile those resources and calls for submission, some of which you may need to subscribe to, but also paying attention to things like looking, if you follow writers on social media, see what publications they follow and who is posting calls for submissions, or who are posting announcements about new issues coming out, and really make sure you're reading in your genres and looking at those different publications and resources that are out there. Because even if you don't have something ready to submit, or they're not currently accepting submissions, it will give you a better idea of, what's out there, what the opportunities are, and also what some of the public publishing norms are, what type of things these publishers are interested in, what they're looking for, what styles they seem to prefer, and that will give you a better idea of what markets might be the best fit for your work. And I also, think it's a great idea to just keep writing too, try to, finish things, keep working on your stories, keep working on revision, because a lot of markets will open up submissions periodically. And if you already know what might be a good fit for your work, when you see that they've opened up submissions, if you already have things written that might be a good fit for them, that can be a good opportunity to submit to them. And you just really, I think, have to be prepared for you're doing that process multiple times and possibly having to wait a bit to hear back. Some markets will get back to you very quickly, others might be longer, and each one should have specific information and instructions, both about what they're looking for and also what format they want you to submit in. Whether or not they're okay with you submitting simultaneously to different markets or not. So a lot of times that information should be pretty easily available for you to see. And I think, like I said, I think you can learn a lot, even if you're not quite ready to submit yet. You can learn a lot just by following those markets, paying attention to what they're doing, following them on social media, and then keeping those in mind for when you are, in fact, ready to submit. And that's all I have to share.
Cool. Thank you, AD. All right. Let's jump on over to David. David, can you give us some more advice for authors looking to get their work published?
Absolutely. So my biggest advice is never give up. The short story market can feel very brutal. I mean, a lot of times it's maybe 2% acceptance rate for stories, but you have to keep going. It's not personal. The editors they get a lot of stories and they can only accept so many. Just keep going. Sometimes it really hurts when those rejects come back. I've changed my perspective to call it a return instead of a rejection. That came from editor Scott Knoll from Dreamforge. He says, no, it's like a library book that you've lent over to an editor, and maybe they return it to you saying, no, this one's not for me. Say, thank you very much, and pass it on to the next editor. And just keep trying, keep putting your work out there. For my story, The Rise and Fall of Frankie's Patisserie, this was my 12th submission on it, and it found a home. It's a Murderbugs kind of story, and this was the perfect place for it. And I'm looking at my list of publications where I'd sent it before, and most of them, well, clearly weren't good fits because the editors didn't accept it. And I hadn't taken the advice that AD was talking about of actually read what they're publishing to see if what I'm sending them is something that fits their market. But as I've gotten more into short stories and I've started to know what different markets are looking for, that's helped me target. But really just don't stop. Don't quit. Accept the return. If it hurts, let it hurt for a little bit and then send it right back out there.
Awesome. Okay. So we've heard a little bit about advice from authors. Let's see, Mike, did you want to jump in and give another quick ping on this one?
Sure. Sorry.
Yeah.
Unmuting microphones is complicated, apparently. One last thing that was kind of hinted at in a few different ways. I'll just say it explicitly. As a former editor and having slush for several magazines in the past 10 years, read the submission guidelines in detail and pay attention to them. If they're telling you they want you to format the document in a certain way, do it, because they mean it. It makes it easier for everybody, if they're running through and reading 100 submissions a day, to have the same format so you can read and not give yourself a headache. So that's the only thing I wanted to add on. Make sure you read the submission guidelines. They're not optional. Just because they're guidelines doesn't mean they're optional. This is not one of those cases.
Yeah, the submission instructions, they're really more guidelines. No, we don't do that here. This is not a Pirates of the Caribbean endeavor. If you find an anthology like that, you're welcome to try to argue with them, but you probably won't win. Okay, so that is the bulk of the questions that I wanted to get out to everyone for, like, anyone who's interested in the upcoming stories for this anthology and writing your own stories. Before we wrap up, I'm going to do a bit of a quick whip through and ask people about sort of what's next for you, or where can people find more of your writing. And I also want to be able to have a couple people who have some near future or recent releases chime in as well. So let's see. Tammy, go ahead and get us started on this one, and we'll go through those ones pretty quick. Go ahead, Tammy.
First of all, David, I really like the return idea. So I have 2 returns that I need to find homes for. I love that. And they were the emails I got back were really nice. It was like, we'll look forward to your next submission. So I'm going to take that as, that they were interested, they just couldn't use that. But what's next for me is I'm going to actually submit for the first time to Writers of the Future, and I'm looking forward to doing that. And I am going to be having my first novel come out May of next year. It's a YA epic fantasy, the first book of the Heart of the World series. It's called Fairies Don't Lie. And it is just briefly about a teen girl apothecary apprentice who accidentally unleashes godlike magic into her world. Now she has to rebox it before her world's version of the boogeyman uses it to destroy all of humanity. Oh no. But there's Pegasi flyers and lots of fairies, and there's a theme to it that no matter who you're born to, you are always enough. So I'm looking forward to having that out, and probably try to find the next thing I'm going to write for Mike's next anthology. That's what I have.
Thank you for sharing, Tammy. All right. Kat, how about you? What's on deck?
Hi there. Once again, this month I'm in, you can't see this very well, Pulp Literature's issue, along with C.C. Humphreys and Robert Sawyer. I have a funny story in here. Again, I write a lot of funny fantasy when I'm writing this kind of thing. And it's out. We had a launch for it last week. It was great fun. And now I am looking forward to trying to do nano in terms of turning a short story I have into a novel. So hopefully I'm going to be able to do that, because I've got to move into longer works, I think, in my prose career. I'm also always working on feature scripts or pilot scripts for television to pitch, but those are a little more difficult, because although you can send a short story to like 50 markets before you sell it if you have to, you pitch TV to like hundreds of people before you get one sale, it seems. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing, rewriting, and I will be doing more short stories. I actually sent Jack a pitch for the vampire one too, so crossing my fingers there. But yeah, thanks very much, and I'm out.
Thank you, Kat. All right, Lee, what's new for you these days?
Well, I just had a haunted house story come out in They Hunt by Night. It's a horror anthology, just barely released this past weekend. So that was a lot of fun to put together. And what else? I'm working on the third book of an epic fantasy trilogy, and I always have irons in the fire. You know, I mean, the more you have out on submission, the less any of those individual returns sting. So, and it's just, you know, always keep writing, play, experiment, explore. So having a lot of fun just with different projects. I'm usually working on 2 or 3 things at a time, honestly.
Yep. You are not alone there. But yeah, congratulations on the new spooky Antho publication. Awesome.
Thank you.
David, go ahead and share what's new for you.
Well, I am currently in the process of publishing my first novel, Death and the Taxman, which is based on the short story of the same name that won Writers of the Future. I ran a Kickstarter for it. I just sent out the ebooks to my Kickstarter backers. I'm currently waiting for the proofs of the prints to come in. Very excited about that. But the book itself will come out April 15th of next year, which is tax day, which I think is very appropriate for Death and the Taxman. And so while I'm waiting for that to publish officially next year, I'll be plotting and writing book number 2.
Nice. All right, Julia, go ahead.
Try that unmuting trick thing. I have, as I mentioned, when my camera wasn't working, I have If I'm Crazy. No, not If I'm Crazy. Excuse me, that's next spring. Jazz by Faylight is the short story collection. This is a proof of the paperback just came out. I had the ebook out at the end of October. And right now I'm writing a new novel and trying to put together a collection of microfiction to have it come out this winter, and next spring hopefully have an older novel of mine, If I'm Crazy, out. It is about a young woman who's sure that her mother has made her crazy, literally. She and some other youths have been put into a hastily renovated abandoned asylum while they figure out if the horrors they're seeing are actually real or not. Unreliable narrator, sort of. We're not sure if what she's seeing is true or not, while she works through the horrors of what's going on, and before they decide to fix her, which is never. So that hopefully will be out in the spring, and another collection out this winter, and then my Jazz by Faylight is out now. So, and I'm working on, like I said, a novel set in the same world as the Jazz by Faylight in New Orleans, with where the veil is thin between the Fey world and our world. So things creep across, and that's fun. I'm working on that for NaNoWriMo.
Cool. Yeah. And depending on when I get this thing posted on YouTube, yeah, so NaNoWriMo for the month of November challenge to write 50,000 words in 30 days, or however you end up modifying that for yourself, if that's like, you know, working on short stories or editing a piece or whatever. Yes, we wish you the best of luck with that. And Mike, go ahead, tell us what's new for you.
Oh, well, I just released a book. I actually got up and ran and grabbed it because I saw everybody was pulling their books out, and that's a great idea. So stealing it. Thank you, everybody. Just released this, Chronicles of a Mad God. It's a standalone urban fantasy book it's actually my first book I wrote, and my third and my fifth, because I've written it 3 different times. I'm done now. Promise. This is it. This is the last one. It's about mentally ill immortals who run a shadow government underneath modern day America, and follows the plot of one of those immortals who is going out to try to find some of the new harvested people who pop up each year before they cause something crazy to happen, like dying on camera and getting back up.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so thank you all for sharing so much about your stories, your process, advice, and upcoming publications, and perhaps recent publications. For my part, I need to note that, well, in addition to Murderbugs being scheduled to release next year, early spring, March, if all goes well, we also are putting together stories for the Vampire Survival Guide, stories about how vampires survive humans. Ideally, it would be the handbook to give to every young vampire who emerges from the coffin, and you're like, here, read this if you want to live to see year 200. And so we're, putting together pieces for that. Wonderbird Press is continuing to try to compile new material and to hopefully start drumming out faster releases. A lot of that is behind the scenes at the moment. The most recent release for me is Murder on the Barge Inn, a murder mystery on a spaceship novella that's a throwback to Agatha Christie. I find it very funny. And if you don't find murder mysteries funny, well, I encourage you to read it and see if you change your mind. The last thing that I need to put in a brief plug for is an upcoming workshop series, workshop intensive actually, through My Story Doctor and Apex Writers Group. We're going to be doing a short story intensive, also referred to as the Hemingway method. So take a look at My Story Doctor, and assuming I figure out all the tech, I'll go ahead and pop that onto the onto an end screen here so people can find that link. All right, that is going to cover it for me and Lucha the Parrot and Wonderbird Press. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to gallery view so we can see all of the authors who are here. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Appreciate you being here. Bye, and I will see you all next time.